The Buddha said, the first arrow is pain that life sends you. The second arrow is the one you fire at yourself, and only you can put it down. Did something happen today that you can't stop replaying? Maybe you made a mistake at work, said something careless to someone you love, or failed, again, to do the thing you promised yourself you would do. And now it's late. You're lying in the dark, eyes closed, but your mind won't stop moving. Why did I do that? I did it again. What is wrong with me? The voice sounds like your own, but it cuts like something sharper. It gets in and stays in. The strange thing is, the painful thing that happened, that part is already over. But the hours spent turning it over in your mind, judging yourself, punishing yourself, that part keeps going and going and going. If any of this sounds familiar, I'd like to sit with you for a few minutes tonight. There's a teaching I want to share. It's called the 2 arrows. According to the Buddha, when something painful happens, that's the first arrow. It strikes, and yes, it hurts. But then we immediately fire a second arrow at ourselves. The story we tell about what it means, the shame we layer on top, the conviction that we're fundamentally flawed. The first arrow was beyond your control, but the second one, you're holding the bow. And the strange mercy of this teaching is that once you see it clearly, once you recognize the moment you reach for that second arrow, you have a choice. What I'm about to share is rooted in the Dhammapada, one of the most beloved collections of the Buddhist teachings, sometimes translated as words of truth or the path of truth. One evening, a young man came to the Buddha. We don't know his name, only that his face was flushed and his eyes were swollen, from crying maybe, or from holding back anger. Perhaps both. He sat down on the ground and said nothing for a while. Then quietly, I cannot bear this pain. The Buddha listened. What kind of pain? Not the body, the man said. It's just, I keep failing. I keep making the same mistakes. Just the other day, I caused trouble for people I care about. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't sleep. I don't know what to do anymore. The Buddha looked at him for a long moment, then asked something unexpected. Can you tell me, how many arrows are you carrying right now? The man was confused. Arrows? I haven't been shot by any arrows. The Buddha smiled gently. You have already. What happened with your friends? That was the first arrow. It hurt. Of course it hurt. Pain like that is real, and sometimes it can't be avoided. That's just part of being alive. He paused. But who has been saying, what a terrible person I am. I always fail. I'll never be enough. Who has been saying that? The man was quiet. That voice, every word of it, is a second arrow. The first arrow, maybe life fired it at you, but the second one, you've been firing it at yourself, again and again. The man couldn't speak, because it was true. The thing that happened, that was one moment, but the self-judgment that followed had lasted for days. The first arrow was the event. The second arrow was what his own mind kept doing afterward. And then, the Buddha said something simple and quiet. The second arrow, you can take it out yourself. The man looked up, tears streaming down his face now, but something in his chest had loosened. How? He asked. The Buddha said, by noticing it, by seeing clearly that this suffering you're adding, it's not the truth of what happened. It's just a story your mind keeps telling. And in that moment, sitting there on the ground with the Buddha's steady gaze upon him, the young man understood. The first arrow had already struck, yes, but he still held the power to lay down the second. The teaching of the 2 arrows runs deep through the Dhammapada and through the heart of Buddhism as a whole. Here is what the Buddha was pointing to. As long as we're alive, pain will come. Illness, loss, failure, aging, things not going the way we hoped. This is the first arrow, and no one is spared from it. We can try to be careful, try to be wise, but we cannot live a human life and avoid being struck entirely. But then, what happens next? We react. Why is this happening to me? This is because I'm not good enough. I'll never recover from this. We add layer after layer of judgment, regret, and self-blame onto the original wound. That is the second arrow. In Buddhist thought, the first arrow is sometimes called dukkha, suffering, pain, the ache of life. The second arrow is something like suffering about suffering. It's the weight we pile on top of the original wound, not from the outside, but from within. And here is what matters. The Buddha never said to ignore the first arrow. He never said to be strong, to feel nothing, to push through. Pain is real, grief is real, disappointment is real. What he was saying is this: you don't have to then turn on yourself, You don't have to follow the pain with, "There's something broken in me," or "I should have known better," or "What kind of person does this?" The Dhammapada opens with these words: "Mind is the forerunner of all actions. Mind is their master. If you speak or act with a troubled mind, suffering follows, as the wheel follows the hoof of an ox." Our suffering is shaped not just by what happens, but by how our mind responds to what happens. The first arrow may be out of our hands, but the second arrow, that one we are holding ourselves. Self-criticism can feel like honesty. It can even feel like responsibility. But when it becomes a habit, when it runs on and on through the night, it is not wisdom. It is just more pain, quietly self-inflicted. So how can this teaching actually reach us in everyday life? Let's start simply, just noticing when the second arrow flies. You make a mistake at work. Something goes wrong. That's the first arrow. It lands, and it hurts. Now watch what happens next. Does it stay there, or does it become, "I always do this, I'm hopeless, I ruin everything"? That shift, that's the second arrow leaving the bow. The same thing happens in relationships. Someone is cold to you, dismissive, and it stings. First arrow. But when that becomes "they hate me, everyone thinks this about me, it must be something I did," the arrows keep multiplying. For parents especially, I hope this finds you. There are nights when you lose your patience with your child, you raise your voice, and afterward, you lie awake thinking, "What kind of parent am I? I'm failing them." The moment of losing your temper, that's the first arrow. But spending the whole night repeating "I'm a failure" doesn't make tomorrow better. Thinking about how to show up differently tomorrow, that's what it means to remove the second arrow. For anyone facing the changes that come with age, when something you used to do easily becomes difficult, and the thought arrives, "I'm pathetic, I'm fading," that's the second arrow. The change itself is real, but the judgment layered on top of it doesn't have to be. Here's one small thing you can try, just one. When something hard happens, say quietly to yourself, "This is the first arrow." That's it, nothing complicated, just that. And then ask, "Do I need to fire another one?" Most of the time the answer is no. Receiving pain and then turning it against yourself are two completely different things. The moment you can tell them apart, something in the chest begins to ease. A student once told me that after practicing this for a week, she realized she had spent 30 years firing second arrows at herself over things that had already passed. She said it was like discovering she'd been carrying an extra weight that she could simply set down. The relief wasn't about forgetting what happened, it was about stopping the habit of twisting the knife. If there's one thing I hope stays with you from today, it's this. Some pain isn't your fault. And even when it is, even when you made a real mistake, choosing to wound yourself over and over again is not something you have to keep doing. The Buddha never said, "Stop hurting." He said, "You don't have to keep shooting yourself after the hit has already landed." The first arrow comes with being alive, but the second arrow, you can set it down. That one small shift might not seem like much, but in the quiet of a hard night, it can make the difference between drowning and floating. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope tonight, you can breathe just a little easier. There was a woman in my Sangha who spent 3 years replaying a single conversation, each time adding harsher words to what she'd actually said, each time letting shame pull her under deeper. One day she simply stopped. Not because the original hurt vanished, but because she finally saw what she was doing to herself. Within weeks, something in her face changed. There was room for living again. That's what I'm asking you to consider.